Hey, hello, welcome to Normal World. I'm Dave Landau, and as usual with me is Angela.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm so good. Glad to be here.
Yes, and Garrett is out. He is signing autographs with Nerdrotic, but we do have a very special guest. You may know him from House of Pain as well as La Coca Nostra. Please welcome Danny Boy O'Connor.
Glad to be here.
Seriously, thank you for coming. I can't thank you enough. I'm a huge fan.
Thank you. Me too.
I really appreciate it. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate you faking it.
Hey, listen. Make it till you make it, right?
Yes, exactly. I'm really glad you're here. I wanted to talk to you. Because a lot of people may not know this. You own the house from the movie The Outsiders.
I do, and I just actually walking through this incredible studio that you guys are broadcasting out of. I just saw a jaw-dropping collection that Glenn Beck has of can I say?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the Archie Bunker set. It's pretty remarkable, and to say the least. I did see the chair and the table next to it at the Smithsonian, and I know that's from it's different season, but I mean, I know that's just a coming attractions of his collection, so I definitely want to talk to him about that. But yes, I do own the house from the movie The Outsiders. If you don't know what The Outsiders is, it's based on a book from S.E. Hinton. She wrote this book and published it when she was 15 and a half. She failed English that year and got a D+ in creative writing.
And published it under S.E. Hinton.
Yeah, so in order to throw people off the trail that she was a female.
Right, writing about a group of boys.
About teen gangs. And the book has never been out of print in 55 years. It sold millions upon millions of copies, and it's most librarians and English teachers' book of choice when they are having kids read a book in 7th grade. It's required reading is what I'm trying to say. And dare I say, not only the U.S., but in the world, because we have over 33 different covers or translations of the book. So it's a phenomenon. And then in 81, a librarian from Fresno, California, Miss Masikian, and shout out to her and her students. They fell in love with the book, and they decided to write. 100 of their students wrote a letter to Francis Ford Coppola, of all people.
Yep.
And encouraged him to look at this and turn it, and if he liked it, perhaps turn it into a movie. And I remember asking Miss Masikian, why Francis Ford Coppola, of all people, since, at that time he was known for The Godfather 1 and 2 and Apocalypse Now. And she said, Danny, he did such a masterful job with The Black Stallion, that staying true to the book, that we thought he'd be a shoo-in. And he got the book, he got the letters. It was a series of things that literally, it's spectacular and miraculous that he even got it. And it would take hours to unpack all of this, but he did get it. He did read the book. He did fall in love with it. And he did decide to make it. So he made that movie in 82. It came out in March of 83. It launched the careers, or you definitely enhanced the careers of the Brat Pack, which was Matt Dillon, Tom Cruise, Ralph Macchio, C. Thomas Howell, Rob Lowe, Patrick Swayze, Emilio Estevez, Diane Lane, Leif Garrett, who's arguably already a star, from the 70s. He was
probably the biggest name at the time.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. And the movie was I don't want to say a flop, but it didn't do great in the box office. It didn't last that long. But like a lot of things from the 80s, the VHS comes out and the VCRs, and we start to watch these things at home, and then cable TV starts to become the thing, and it finds its audience there. And so it becomes a cult classic. And now it's just a time-honored, American classic.
Yep.
And I loved it. I saw it at 13 and a half, maybe 14.
Okay.
Probably how old was I? I mean, I know how old. I'm trying to think what grade that is, but I probably saw it
middle school, maybe freshman in high school, if that.
No, it was probably
middle school.
The last year of 9th grade. And I remember thinking for the first time, there's my story on screen in a different era, but the way I felt, disconnected, separate and apart from,
it's not like the Catcher in the Rye shoot Reagan thing. It's like the actual next to you, because there is that.
It is.
Because there was the attempts at those books, but then there was this movie that actually, I don't know, I felt something when I watched it too. I showed it to my son probably 3 months ago, who's 8, and I wanted him to see it because there is something there that I think you can learn at all ages. But yeah, there is a connection that I think you feel that's more modern, even though it does take place in the
late
greaser.
60s, yeah.
Right.
And for me, it's just that's what I think. The original appeal was it was stylistically, it looked like the stuff my mother used to brag about my father about. You know, my father went to prison when I was 2 months old, and I really met him twice, and he was murdered when I was 17. So, when I see that era, the late 50s, you know, early 60s with denim and old cars. There were new cars to them, but you know, and you see like Thunderbirds and Mustangs and Corvairs and Corvettes and all of the things, and I was like, man, this is cool. And the takeaway I got from that movie when I first saw it was that if the best it gets is just finding your family or building your family outside of the family that you were dealt, and if that ain't enough, then you can go out and find your tribe, your people, and mutually bond in that way that I've got your back, you got mine. I mean, there's a name for it. It's called the gang. You know, some kids find it in sports if they have guidance and if they have, you know, I didn't have that. So for me, I was looking for the gang, and I found it. Unfortunately at the time. I mean, it gives and it takes.
Well, and then with Coppola, I know he said that movie was about family. You know, people talk about The Godfather being about family, but he said that movie was really about family because that was what they had to find as a unit because none of them had it.
And the lack thereof because their family died in a tragic accident while coming back from a picnic.
Which you can relate to very well. And then who did you relate to most?
In the movie, two people. So that's a great question, and I ask kids all the time, and the answers obviously vary. I wanted to be Matt Dillon or the Dallas Winston character so bad it hurt, but he was a little bit older, and I related to the Johnny Cade sensitive side, and I loved his greaser. He just looked like a real greaser, and Matt Dillon was like the archetype, you know, like the archetypal, whatever the word I'm trying to say, you know, like he was the Brando of my generation, you know, like he was that cool, tough guy, whatever.
Oh, for sure.
All the characters I liked, but those two were the ones that stood out the most. And
and he had more of that dangerous appeal to him too. There was something he was a little bit crazier than everybody else. He was a little bit more, I think there was something to him too, that it was an antisocial that wasn't his fault.
Yeah.
You know, it was just sort of the hand he was dealt.
Yeah, and I like that he was like he had like Johnny's back in that way. Like he favored Johnny, and that was another like, you know, Pony didn't like that fact because Pony Boy saw that Dally was trouble for Johnny, and Johnny was like, I don't care, I accept him, you know, unapologetically, and you know, in the way like animals love you unconditionally. Little Johnny was like, Dally could do no wrong. I know he's rough around the edges, you know, and he explains that much at the drive-in when he's like, he's all right. You know, if you hung around him a little, you'd understand. He was advocating for that big brother friendship and him as a person. So
and I think we all, and I'm sure obviously you did, but we all grew up with that person who you know is crazy, but they have your back.
I may have been that person who was crazy.
And you are. You're 6'6". I needed you in my life.
Yeah. You know what? It's funny, but listen. And when I say we, I guess Generation X, you know, we grew up, like, I was raised by TV. I was raised by music. I was raised by movies. Like, those were the big brothers, and the marching orders came from, like, you know, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, 1982, one of my favorites. Like Mike Damone, shout out to Robert Romanus, my good friend. Met him years later, and we oh,
really? That's awesome.
Yeah, it's my man. But his
all the tickets.
His 5-point plan. If you know the movie, you know he breaks it down to Ratner, who has no luck with the ladies, on how to do this. Right. Anybody at 13, you know, sees this and is like, this is the big brother I never had. Here's the plan. And the plan was flawed, you know, but it's better than no plan. And so, like, that's just like one example of, like, I was taking bits and pieces from all of the stuff that I liked. The way this person talked, the way this person walked, how you dressed, how this one, whatever, and then you build your version of you, or I don't know what you did, but I built that. And it started with, like, Fonzie. It started with Sha Na Na. Like, I came from New York, was transplanted into Los Angeles. There was culture shock.
You were born in Brooklyn, right?
Born in Brooklyn and raised in LA, and then I went back every summer to New Jersey and New York until I was about 13. And right after I seen The Outsiders, I'm like, I'm good. I got this. You know, I don't have to go back. You don't have to, you know. And I had a great time going back and forth. And it was literally like having the internet before having the internet. You know, I'd leave LA dressed in OP and Vans and the sneaker, you know,
Of course.
the shoot. But you say that, but a lot of people didn't know back then because it was a local Los Angeles family-run business, and I think it was like mail order only back in the days. If you could order it from like Skateboarder magazine or Surfer magazine, there was no standalone.
It must be because I had
skate shops had them, and BMX shops may have had them.
See, I had skater friends and friends that surfed.
But yeah,
And that was why I must
Back
have
east?
known. East, yeah. My cousin's New Jersey. My uncle ran Bally's. So we would go there when I was a real little kid.
I used to surf at Point Pleasant and
Did you really?
and
Okay.
Lavalette and the Ocean Hut, and yeah, I had cousins. They lived in Brick Township, so I would be there every summer, and we would go to the Jersey Shore, and we would literally surf. I mean, it sucks because there's like jellyfish and crabs and
Oh, yeah, I remember. They just all be sitting, you
So
like
good.
poke them with sticks and stuff.
yeah, and helmet crabs, and those
Yeah.
things are looking like yeah. All that to say, I'm an amalgamation of all of those like influences of like the 70s and 80s, man. Like sitting there eating sugared up cereal, watching TV relentlessly, and like I built like the type. Carmine Raguzzo, like all of those characters from Taxi. What's his name? Tony Danza's character. Like I always gravitated to those. Saturday Night Fever and John Travolta when he was in Welcome Back, Kotter. Like I always liked the greaser.
Oh, of course.
You know, I always liked that guy who felt like he was probably from back east, or was clearly from the East Coast. That's how Mike Damone looked to me. He was like, kind of like, want to buy a watch?
Right.
Hey, is the mustache coming in rat? He had his whole, and that was me in a perfect world. Like that's who I modeled myself after. And it's just funny that, this thing stays with you for years. And I look back and I said, like, I didn't have an older brother. I didn't have a father figure in the home. And it's the source of a lot of the problems too. And that's a whole other topic and whatever, but I'm a firm believer because I speak to kids a lot now because of this museum, and I can see clearly the difference a father in the home makes, man. And I didn't have that, so I built it through all of those pop culture, references and all of that. But
because you're turning to gang life, I assume.
yes,
Pretty young, and then of course you're turning to, I assume, drugs and alcohol.
alcohol originally.
Alcohol originally.
Stayed away from drugs for years until I didn't.
And then as I saw House of Pain was working class Irish.
Yeah.
Or at least tough Irish, and I'm Irish and Italian, so that was kind of how I related to it. I mean, I was, it was 92 when you had Jump Around.
This is correct.
Yeah, so I was 10, and then I remember loving that song, and watching that. And so when you were kind of molding into that, did you feel that was a character? Like, were you partying, or did you feel that was a big part of yourself?
No, it was a big part of myself, and it was also, and I don't speak about this a lot, only because it just never comes up, and that you've segued into it perfectly.
Thank you.
My mother had an incredible record collection growing up, and it was all Motown, and it was all
From Detroit, so I appreciate that a lot.
course. Listen, the world appreciates that Motown sound a lot, so
good.
there's nothing else like it. And some of that, was disco as well, which came after that. And then if you know, then obviously you know that then hip hop kind of gets birthed out of the disco thing. It's like the high BPMs and people toasting over the.
Sure.
So I was predisposed to that. But when I got to California and kids were like, yo, you like that stuff, punk? Like, they were calling me Disco Dan. And like back then, those were fighting words. It was like a slur. You know what I mean? It was like a racial slur. So for another white guy to call you Disco Dan, they were implying something else.
Right.
And I was like, what's wrong with, like, I grew up in the roller rinks as well in California and listened to the Gap Band. It was a wonderful, Charlie Wilson just got a star on the Walk of Fame. And that's another incredible story from rags to riches to living homeless and a drug addict to now sober and starring, from the Gap Band, if anybody doesn't know, and one of my favorite, R&B acts of all time.
Of course.
All that to say, hip hop for me was like a normal progression. What was the question again?
Oh no! Like what?
I forget what
like when you became that character for like kind of.
I've always been involved. Like I've always had a love for like that kind of soul music. Like that kind of stuff that hits like the way it does, bass lines and drum beats. So hip hop was like a natural progression. But at that time, if you were white and suburban kid and you wanted to go to like any functions in Los Angeles, this was like the height of like Bloods and Crips and all black neighborhoods, all black venues, and you wanted to go to those spots, you had to be like thorough. You had to really be about your business. And I was always, always, but you know, like I'm trying to think how young, but I was always about my business. Let's just keep it 100. And I'm not trying to sell anything. Anybody who knows me from back then knows, you know?
No, I mean, this is the year that Menace to Society came out to give people an idea of what it was like.
I would have gone back way before that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going back to breakdancing and
oh, yeah, I mean, but I just mean in 92 for that hit.
No, of course, but I was hitting the spots since at least 85, 86.
Which, I mean, and then you're looking at that's in Detroit and then LA. I mean, this is like a crack epidemic era, too, where there's a lot of violence
100%.
around. Yeah.
And so it was absolutely the crack epidemic. And I lived in the San Fernando Valley, and we had a thing called the Country Club, and across the street was Sherman Square roller rink, and both of the roller rinks had been like it fizzled out a long time prior to that, a couple of years before. So they used any kind of roller rink as like a new event center. Like, we'll take anything, please book us. So a lot of the hip hop and punk rock stuff would book there, and then across the street was the Country Club, which was in like a semi, like it was just a rock like legendary spot. So at 2 a.m, these two crowds would empty out and then be like facing off, wanting to kill each other. That's how separated everything was back then.
Right.
So that's why my mind is like, but
I almost like that it's over music, though.
it was over everything,
Well,
bro.
yeah, that's
you could
true.
get mashed
Color,
out, bro,
yeah.
for just the wrong T-shirt, the wrong band on your T-shirt.
Right.
You could get mashed. That's why, like, listen, you go, not that I've been to a mall. Well, actually, it wasn't a mall. It was just not too. But I see kids now with Ramones shirts, and they got faux hawks, and, you know, they're 3. Like, where I'm from, you got spit on and called the F word, and I'm not talking about, you know.
Oh, I know exactly.
It was, and you just, it was a badge of honor. So what, now what? Yeah, whatever, bro. Like, they're throwing stuff from the top, you know, they're throwing Slurpees down like in you know, Weird Science. You know, they're pouring stuff on your head because you are just a target if you did that back then. Now everything is like whatever. But back then you had to pay a price if you wanted that. And I loved hip hop so much, I was willing to go to those spots and just risk it.
Right.
And I got in a lot of fights back then. I was I was nice with my hands. I was a little string bean, but I was quick, and I was always down to fight. So everybody knew no matter what, you're going to get a fight from me. And as it progressed, gunplay came involved. At 17, I was arrested for attempted murder for a shooting. So I trip out now because I'm dating a girl who has kids that one of them is my age, and I think, what a sweet little boy, like nice, good kid. I can't believe at 17 I was already like thorough. I was already getting into like taking penitentiary chances with my life, doing things that I'm like ashamed of now. But at the time, I was like...
The way that people were 17 for Gen X is not the same as now, and I'm very thankful for that.
Kids can't even go out the house by themselves. But and then also, like, you know, let me tell you this, too. When I got to LA, they were busing. So I ended up getting taken from one part of the valley, and they put us all the way over in Pacoima, which is the home of Richie Valens. And it was a Chicano neighborhood and a Latin neighborhood, and great people. But the kids were tough. And if you came from a little lily white school in Canoga Park and you went out to Pacoima, those kids were already about that life. They were already gangbanging. They were already reading Teen Angel. They were already like, what's up? They would test. Yeah. And I reacted. But a lot of kids got mashed out or got, you know, their lunch money taken from them. And, you know,
of course,
I was never a bully, but you could never take anything from me except for ass whooping and good advice, and probably mostly just ass whoopings. And I'm a tall, skinny string bean, but I'm nice with my hands. And I've always, like I said, so
it's good to have the Irish in you.
Yeah, it is. And so getting back to that, so now imagine all of these years, I'm like in that space.
You're trying to find a creative outlet, I'm sure.
100%. The Beastie Boys come, and now they got proof of concept. I'm like
Which is unreal,
at the time, #1 Beastie fan at that time. And then, you know, by the time it came, you know, for most kids were finishing high school and thinking about careers or going to college, I had dropped out at 9th grade, bro. They pushed me forward to 10th. I hung out, joined the gang, started going out every night to nightclubs. There were teen nightclubs at 16 you could get in, and being tall, they didn't care, you know. Right. So I was out all hours, all night, drinking around the clock, and decided, you know what, my mom's on my back. I know she's throwing me out when I'm 18. So I started a band, and I was like, I ain't going to do this. I'm going to do music. And it was really more of a goof. You know, I knew Everlast from high school. We were, you know, around the same areas. He was another dude who was white.
DJ Lethal as well, or did you meet him later?
No, that was later. Okay. Yeah, that was Eric's DJ before me and him I put House of Pain together with him. But at the time, he had just got signed to Ice-T's record label. He was all about 17 or 18, which was, again, another, like, wow. Like, you're in high school and Ice-T is like, you're in Rhyme Syndicate and you get a record deal.
That was almost like punk rap at the time, if I remember, wasn't it?
Eric stuff? No.
No? Okay.
Eric, not at all. Eric, listen, he rhymed at the highest level even back then. And so I saw his talent. I was like, this guy's great. And this gets to how House of Pain comes about.
Okay.
But his record comes out, it comes and it goes. There's really no noise made about it. And at least, it just didn't. And he got dropped and he moved on. Now, at the time, I was doing a lot of credit card theft. I'll give you just we had the ability, I knew somebody who had the ability to reprogram stolen information on the back of the cards. So we would get sets of those and IDs to match, and we would go out and shop. And I was doing a lot of that. And everybody knew me for that, and a few other people that I ran with. And I ran into Everlast, and I put him onto that. He was getting kicked out of his house. I let him stay with me and my cousin. We gave him a set of cards. We hooked him up with some gear. And what I realized with Everlast was like, look, bro, you're an incredible talent, writer, MC, etc. But you have no idea about all the rest of it. And there's a 360 that makes the whole thing right. And he was lacking like the crew, he was just good at the writing and the rapping part, you know what I mean? Straight up and down. But I had a gang and I had a bunch of dudes. I was a leader of men and had a lot of dudes that were like, Danny Boy this, Danny Boy that, was in my circle. We were getting money. We were out there wilding out. Yeah. So I was like, similar to Suicidal Tendencies, how like a gang supports like the band and then the band becomes this big phenomenon. Like House of Pain was really like the Mickey Mouse Club, which was our punk rock gang, which is a whole other story. Like I said, it'll take hours to unpack all this, but everybody who knows. You can Google it. It comes up. There's this thing in Rolling Stone magazine in 1986 about Valley suburban gangs, and Boy George is on the cover, and it's a 6-page expose, and it talks about it all. Yeah. It was actually turned into a movie called Lost Angels, where Ad Rock got his first like starring role.
Oh, I know that movie. Yeah.
Us and FFF and a few other gangs from the Valley. It's a crazy story. So we surrounded Everlast. We put him in. We made a group around that, and at the time, like I said, and I'll wrap this up, is I loved hip hop so much, but all of a sudden I felt like with the 5%er stuff that was going on, which is this prison it's a sect of Islam that is 5%ers, and it's like a prison sect more than it is anything else. Okay. And Farrakhan's a prophet, and I think you ought to listen to what he could say to you, what you ought to do. That's Public Enemy, one of my favorite groups. So I listened to Farrakhan, and Farrakhan said white people are the devil. So I'm like, I'm white. I'm not the devil. Why am I being called the devil? So I remember being like upset about hearing like, so now I'm not welcome? Like I got my back at the wall at the spots. I'm fighting for my place at the table in hip hop, even just to be a fan. And now my favorite bands are telling me that like, I'm a devil. I'm the white devil. I'm like, whoa. So I was like, I went home one night. I'm like, what am I? To my mother. My mother's like, your side of the family's Irish, She's part Irish, Dutch, and French. But my father's family come right off the boat. I mean, they're literally from County Cork. And so
right to Ellis Island.
I'm like, I'm Irish. And that's what so all of a sudden I use that as my like, I'm not white, but I'm white. I'm always white. But I'm saying I'm Irish white, whatever that means. We came over here because we were persecuted. We were Irish Catholics who came over here 50 years ago.
You're the least respected person at one point in this country. That's
so
how
it's
my
like,
relatives
so
were,
I'm like, I'm like, that's me. And if you don't like it, fuck you. Yeah. Suck it. So my whole shit was, my energy was that. And then I started to, like, all of my other dudes in my spot were like the same kind of energy. Even if they were black or Mexican, we were like, we were a ragtag bunch of dudes from the Valley. And in order to go to punk gigs back then, or hip hop gigs, which were like, it sounds like nothing, but back then they were cutty, and you could get lumped up if you just went in there, you and your boy. Yeah. You really had to be, because you were catching it from Mexican gangs, you were catching it from black gangs, you were catching it from, and we're just suburban white dudes. So we stuck together like glue, and we had it. And people started to talk like, these motherfuckers, Sorry to keep cursing, but
no, you're fine.
But that's what they were talking about. Like, these motherfuckers are live ones, and so people start to be like, all right, they're good, let them go. You know what I mean? Let that, don't fuck with them. There's easier victims out there, and so. That really is the genesis of House of Pain. But it really came down, it was a reaction on my part to be like, look, I don't know why the culture is mad at me other than I get the injustices of the world and, but I'm like, I'm just a fucking kid from New York who's loved hip hop from day one, who's been involved in it at some level, even as just a peripheral fan. And now I'm the devil? Like, what? And so I was like, fuck that. I'm Irish. I'm white. This is House of Pain. And so I felt like we should be unapologetic. And I said, Everlast, if you want to keep, like, let's do this. And then he understood at that point, and it was a turning point in like 91 where he was like, yo, this is that. And so he hooked up with Muggs, who he knew from 7A3, who had just finished the Cypress record, and the Cypress record had just come out. And at first, it wasn't a massive smash.
That was the self-titled one, right?
Self-titled one of the best records in hip-hop of all time.
Agreed.
Not just because, I was close to that crew. That's arguably from top to bottom a fucking masterpiece.
Yes.
And then, Muggs did 3 songs with Eric and Be Real, and it was, jump around, put your head out, and come and get some of this. And we sent out the demos, and ironically, we got signed to Tommy Boy. We had offers from other people, but we got signed to Tommy Boy. Monica Lynch, a Chicago native who ran, she was the vice president of Tommy Boy, and she said, man, I've a million CDs and tapes I get every day, demos. Yeah. I looked in and seen this Irish logo, and I saw your photos. I thought you guys could have been my brothers or my little cousins. I said, who are these guys? I can't believe, she just off aesthetics, she played it and was like, whoa, oh, fuck. Like she heard Jump Around. She's like, oh, fuck. Now, all that to say, I'm a graphic artist and a marketing guy before I'm anything else.
Okay.
I worked at a record store at that time. I was the product manager at the Warehouse, the chain, the record chain, the Warehouse. I don't know if they were on the East Coast. I think it was primarily a West Coast thing. But Warehouse was like Music Plus or Tower Records.
We had Sam Goody and those ones.
The Peaches and all, whatever. Yeah. So we had that, and I was able to, at a young age, at 17, 18, I stole more than we sold, bro. Like I was able to open every record and play it. This is before, like I said, these kids now, they don't get it because this is pre-internet. You just can't go on YouTube and listen to every song you want for free.
No, I was breaking cases. I'm sorry. I'm pretty sure I stole your album.
Hey, listen, high five. I would have stole it too. I would have stole a handful and gave them to the boys and be like, check this out.
Right.
Bro, it's all good. And that's what we did. So it was like my music and movie IQ went through the roof working at that record shop. But also, and I'll never forget this, and my buddy Ill Bill, shout out to Ill Bill from Lakota, he laughs, because he's a diehard metal fan that turned MC, and I was like a diehard B-boy who also was in a punk gang and listened to a little bit of like way alternative stuff. But I remember taking off the shelf a Celtic Frost record, thinking this is an Irish band, and it has nothing to do with Irish and Ireland. It's just a hardcore. They're probably like from Sweden or Denmark or something, but bro, it was at a time where like the only way you're going to hear what this is about is to take it off, take it in the back, open it, play it, and then throw it in the returns thing and go, what? I don't know who opened that, where that came from.
Right.
But I was able to listen to anything that my heart ever wanted to listen to and then some. And I always credit them. Shout out to Warehouse. It's long gone. I still know, I think her name was Viola Brown, who was the main GM for the whole corporation. Right. She ended up becoming an A&R and working with a lot of hip-hop groups at the time. She was, but that is how House of Pain came about.
It's incredible.
We were all struggling. We were all, Lethal came with the package. Shout out to DJ Lethal, one of the greatest humans you'll ever meet. And, we went off and the demo, we got signed and we dropped that record and it blew up. And
number 3 was Jump Around in the U.S. and number 6 in the U.K.
Pretty good.
I'd say it's amazing.
Especially for, guys who, I'll speak for myself, but bro, even at a young age, it was like jails, institution, or death. Those were the things that were like looking like directly, like I was doing. I was constantly preparing myself for a prison cell because my father had been that way prior to that. Right. My mother would always say, you're going to be just like him, be dead or in prison by the time you're 21. And the stuff I was doing was the stuff that would get you there. So I looked at it like, and that was part of the gang life too. A lot of these kids were coming out of, I did some little juvenile hall skid bids and whatnot, but a lot of the kids that I was running with were coming out of boys' homes, and they were coming out of CYA, the California Youth Authority, and they were coming out of juvenile halls. They were the tougher kids. They were white kids who dressed like cholos and listened to hip hop and punk rock, and that's what we were, and that's what our gang was. And we were white kids that you would mistake if you were a cop and didn't know better for Mexican kids,
right?
Who listened to hip hop and punk rock, and with a little bit of new wave.
Oh, I like it. Let me get this ad read out of the way real quick. Right. I'll tell you what's far more comfortable than a juvenile hall.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and get it into. I really have to get better at segueing these so we get to keep our sponsors. But I will tell you what they don't have there, and it's Miracle Made sheets. If you want to sleep comfortable, honestly, I have them. They're really comfortable. They're self-cooling. They are inspired by NASA. They are self-cleaning. You can lay there. You can sweat. You can eat whatever you want. I'm not saying you shouldn't, clean them after you eat a bunch of cookies or whatever, but they're comfortable. The quality's high. I like, Angela, you like them.
I do. I really do.
They really are comfy. They feel, a lot of A-plus hotels use them, 4-star, 5-star hotels. I don't remember the highest star, but that's what I was going for when I was trying to pitch them.
I'd say it's 5.
I go 5.
Yeah.
I really do love them. And we don't say yes to every sponsor, which you probably don't believe, but we actually turn some down. Like even gambling. I've said no to all those sponsors because I don't think it's right to convince you to do that. So my own opinion is these are good sheets. I highly recommend them. And you can get a discount by going to trymiracle.com/normal. And you can get a discount as well as 3 free towels. That's face, body, and hand when you go there right now. trymiracle.com/normal.
I really like their color selection too.
Yeah, you can pick it out.
Yeah.
They'll let you.
They'll even let you pick the color.
It's not all about what they want.
Yeah.
It's about you, what you want for your comfort.
Yeah.
So you're huge at this point. I know who you are. My friends and I are all listening to this, and I've always wondered, did you think Jump Around was going to be the one that caught on?
So I'm laughing because it is you can imagine how many times I've got that, and then I've also had that thrown in my face recently, and I'm going to tell you about it.
Sorry, I didn't.
No, it's great. No, it's a valid question, and yes is the short answer, and I'll tell you why. Because at the time, so my mother told me, at 16, my birthday, around that time, she says, 2 more years. I'm like, 2 more years? She's like, 2 more years and I don't have to deal with you anymore. And I was like, oh, fuck. Like, that's a...
My dad had the same Irish mom.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, so I was like, oh, that's awesome. So I made sure I popped smoke and got out of there before I became 18.
Right.
And I moved to Hollywood. And I got a little apartment right off of Melrose, and it became the hangout. It was really good. It was great. It was the greatest time, one of the greatest times of my life. And at the time, if you come from the San Fernando Valley, the trick is to get into Hollywood and stay there.
Yes.
And they always say the odds are good, but the goods are odd. Yes. But if you were a comedian or an actor or a rapper, white rapper in the late '80s and '90s, it was like what? But there was a chance, and really good time there. And I already forgot again what the...
If you thought that was going to be the hit, but no.
Okay, so yes, and the reason why is Everlast disappeared for a day. He went out to meet Muggs. He had these songs written. I had heard the demo, or no, I didn't hear the demo version. He came back with the demo tape, and then he gave me a copy of the tape, and I played it, and I was like, wow, okay, this is good. Because Muggs, as a producer and a DJ, we didn't work with him originally. We were like a 5-piece band, and House of Pain was like a band, and we were trying to do Chili Pepper-ish. We were rhyming with a live band.
Sure.
And nobody wanted to hear it. They were like, all the labels, they were like, you're either hip-hop or you're rock. There's no format for this on the radio. What are you doing? So we got rid of the band, and then we worked with Quincy Jones' son, QD3, and we did a 3-song demo.
Okay.
And it was a little too R&B-ish and then finally fed up. Eric was like, talk to Muggs. Muggs was just finished with the Cypress and was like looking for something. And I get a call one day and he's like, come down here, meet Muggs. He wants to meet you and talk about this Irish thing. So Everlast had sold Muggs on not only the music he wanted to do, but this Irish thing. And I think Muggs was the guy who the light bulb went off. He's like, Irish, that's intriguing. Let me hear more. Because they were like the Cuban Afro funk thing.
Sure.
And he was like, he understood the branding aspect of it, where at the time, I don't think Eric did as much, Eric being Everlast. Maybe he did. But I'm just saying, like, that was my department. And I was the branding guy. It was like already on the logo for the Mickey's beer and...
I remember
and the
that
style, and
I drank.
We already had it, we were flannels and slick back hair and
yeah, you had
Doc
definitely
Martens.
the cholo sort of look.
Yeah, and it was like a mix between both of those. So, and Muggs got it when he met me. He was like, "Okay, now I can see this, whatever this is," and so I played the demo. I got the demo after he worked on those 3 songs with B Real and Muggs. everybody used to come to my house. It was like a train station. I mean, swear to God, everybody, the hottest place in LA at the time was Melrose. Yeah. And everybody would go there. Even people who didn't like me from high school would go to Melrose and then walk up to my apartment and go, "Are you there?" They want to smoke a joint or drink a beer or just hang out. And I started playing that. And when there's nobody at that age like your friends, because they will tell you there's no filter at that age. You're 17, 18, 19.
And especially if you add drugs and alcohol.
Yeah, and they would have said, "Oh, this shit sucks. Stop playing the same song." But we played it. My whole living room went like bonkers. And I played it again, and we were like destroying my living room every time I would play that song. And I was like, "Holy shit, this is powerful stuff." And everybody who would have been like little hater, that wasn't even a thing then, but it was like anybody who would be critical was like, I could see it on their face. They were like, "Oh no, this changes everything."
Yeah, the jealousy goes to a little bit of respect. But
yeah. There's a whole different okay, this is something different. I'm gonna have to contend with like this. You're gonna change soon, aren't you? Because this is gonna. And it's funny that we're talking about it and to lay it out that way, because it wasn't soon after I started getting panic attacks. Because growing up, I had heard all the negative messages at home. You're gonna be like your father did, or in prison, blah blah blah. And all of a sudden, people are like, "Yo, bro, you're gonna be a fucking star, kid. Like, yo, bro, this shit is bananas, dude. You guys are gonna fucking blow up." And when you hear that, when you're not used to hearing that, because you're like, you know what I mean? Like you're pre-programmed to be like, "You're going to prison, kid." Or my mother used to have a good one too, and God bless her. I gave as much as I took, blah blah blah. And she used to say, she was funny because I'd come home from the mall after racking a ton of shit, and she's like, "Yeah, okay." And I was like, "What?" And like she didn't know. She's like, "You're gonna be the best dressed dude in prison, kid. You keep it up." And we were laughing. There was a running gag, the best dressed dude in prison.
Well, you're going from a self-fulfilled prophecy, basically, going after what your father's life was, into all of a sudden being 100%. And complete opposite.
Accepting that, because when my mom would have a few beers, she would tell war stories, and they were always like, this hero guy came out, and then on another time she would tell me what a POS he was, and so I was always glorifying this guy who really photos is all I had, and in photos, I'll show you photos, you'll be like, "Oh shit, I get it."
Right.
So I knew things were going to change for all of us, and it was more than just like hyping ourselves up or gassing ourselves up. I was like, "This is different, bro. This is seriously different," and it was scary. Because it was like a Twilight Zone episode where people like who used to kind of give you, just like whatever, be like, "Yo, bro," like all of a sudden they're being super nice, like wanting to be around. You're like, "What the fuck, bro?" Fame is a drug. And proximity to fame, proximity to wealth, proximity to anything that is a phenomenon or phenomenal, people act different. And in that era, in that age group, will do anything. I mean, and I don't like. I've never. It's probably never come up. It's probably some shit I should say for like a tell-all.
Right.
But my girlfriend's friends were like pitching me on the low. Like it's that intoxicating, and it wasn't because I changed in looks all of a sudden. It was because my status was starting to go, "Holy shit, this is going to really be something." And then once it came out on the radio, it was on like, I remember going through the stations and hearing it on 3 different stations at once.
Well, and that's a level
heavy
of
rotation on MTV, so they're playing it every half hour or every hour at minimum.
Right.
And it was just like everywhere we went, it was like carte blanche, and it was like, bro, we were like the toast of Hollywood, and we had just got there. Like we're Valley kids, but we had just got to Hollywood. So every club was like, "Come on in." Shit that we had no wins. You can't get no like Roxbury or Carlos and Charlie's if you were just regular, white kids from the Valley. They're like,
let alone get in line.
Exactly. Like, but this was now like cutting, like it's just life-changing stuff. And I don't know that anybody you can't prepare for that. You just don't, there's no like tools to be like, "Okay, don't let this go to your head."
Well, especially that era of fame too is what I'm
different.
It's a bit different. There's so many different elements where you can find a fan
and everybody's
base.
got and a photo and a thing. But at that time, it was like you literally came from another world, and all of a sudden we're like a deity, If
you heard it on the radio in LA and it was a hit, we heard it in Detroit. We heard it everywhere else. Like you were a monster of success.
Yeah.
It like that.
In that era. I mean, that quick.
So the anxiety had to cripple you.
It did. And I thought, it was mind-bending.
I mean, honestly, just the way to put it.
It came and went, thank God. It lasted for like what felt like, and then now that I'm thinking about it, when my best friend, Matt Champy, rest in peace, that's who the Jump Around video was dedicated to. He died suddenly. They stole from it was a stupid mistake. They stole 2 Whippet nitrous oxide
Oh, the tanks?
Tanks from the hospital, because the hospital used to store them outside in a gated thing, and they cut the gate.
Okay.
They stole them. They drove around getting high off them, and they pulled into a store, stole balloons at like midnight. They got them on camera, and then they were in the back of a pickup truck, and they put the tube through the split window and closed it, and they were filling up balloons, and that.
Oh, no.
No scientists, but gas eats air, and they ended up freeze-dried, and it was shocking to all of us. 3 people lost their lives that day, but one was my best friend. I mean, when I say best friend, it wasn't like loosely based on like a good friendship. It was like my best friend. He was literally going to be like a hype man in the group, you know? Yeah. And so it was devastating. And so have like high highs all of a sudden, like super exceed anything you can imagine, almost Twilight Zone-ish, where it's not good. And then low lows where you just lose your best. It was crazy, bro. So
and I've had that experience at that age, not the level of fame, but to know what it's like even to deal with loss and that itself, let alone to have to deal with the fact that you're now huge.
Yeah, because I guess, can I tell you something else? And
Please.
I'm thinking out loud. Even when I was doing bad things, I never considered myself a bad guy. I just figured myself an opportunist in the sense of like nobody's going to, I don't have a car waiting for me at 16 like all of my other friends in the neighborhood. I don't have the clothes that I need to go to this high school where everybody else has Guess jeans and Tons or Ton. You know, poor me as an adult, I can look back and go, so what, suck it up. But at the time it was everything. So I stole the clothes that I wanted and needed, and I would, you know, and I did a lot of extracurricular shit that was like, but in my heart of heart, I was a good guy doing bad things. When you get that kind of, when I got that kind, I don't know what anybody else, but when I got that kind of stuff, it's a corruption or a thing that throws everything out of the natural balance of like God's balance of like, you like me now because of something that like Eric wrote it, I put the logo in the band together, Muggs produced it, but people are like jockeying that really were cold to you, and now they're like throwing themselves at you, and it just is like, it's unnatural. It's a fucking complete perversion of like all of the senses. And one thing I always stand on my business. I'm about principles, bro. Mm-hmm. Like your truth is your truth, and that's subjective. You know, everybody has they see something, they have a unique perspective. It doesn't mean it's the truth. You may believe it. My ex-wife was scared of heights. Doesn't mean I was scared of heights when we went to the stadium, and I didn't feel like we were going to fall off the stadium. Right. She did. And it was a very real fear for her. So her fears are her facts, but they weren't my facts. But the principle is different, and I'm a very principled guy. And when you get that kind of fame and people treating you different because of something that you're part of that is now viably, like if there's some like, you know, perceived, there was real value, but there's value to it, and they treat you different. It's, some people may go, cool, I don't care how it comes, just as long as it comes. I was kind of little, it always was one of those things like, so now I can go to my girlfriend's house and her family like thinks I'm good. And I get it. You don't want a guy like me who's gangbanging and doing stupid shit.
Sure.
But there's also a part of it where it's like, so really all it took was a little bit of money, because I didn't change the behavior. Is what I'm saying. And everybody knew that. I was still fighting at night, every club. I was putting my hands on people even more. You know, I was still pistol packing. I still
could get away with it more.
Yeah, no doubt. But I didn't change. It wasn't like I changed for the better. My status changed for the better. For what people in Hollywood, my status changed. And my economics, you know, got better. I started making good money, but if I wasn't acceptable to you then, trying to get by the way I knew how to get by, because again, like I have a learning disorder and I don't read and take them information good. And the 9th grade education and fear of failure and being a perfectionist, you know, if it's not perfect, then why bother? And that's an easy way to quit on everything.
Absolutely.
And then, you know, another thing, and I'll end my TED talk, but like when you get used to like quitting out on something, everything becomes a fuck it. If it just gets difficult, I quit. And I don't know where I picked that up. I'm not blaming anybody in my house, but it's something that like, I just remember seeing at an early age where anytime something got difficult, everybody goes, I'm not doing it no more. And so it became a thing. It was acceptable. And I had to come a long way to get away from that. And I didn't even know that was a thing until, I did the work years later. But I don't have even really like real good relationships with people who do that kind of stuff, because it's contagious. Because anytime there's a problem, you're just out. Like you just take your ball and go home. Like I don't get down like that. And I don't hang out with people who get down like that, because you're going to do that to me every time there's a bump in the road. And life is life. It's a very, so Yeah.
Yeah, and I think especially when you're dealing in Hollywood and that agents and in that money and people that are only in it for that money, and you see that they don't
100%.
actually work on any other principle.
And you know it in your core that these people are just eating off your plate, and you just like, you kind of like one blind eye, and then one it's so good, just pretend you don't see it. It's a struggle.
Yeah, a little piece of you doesn't want to believe it, and then that little piece of you is shattered when it
Fair play
happens to you.
100%. There's no other way to, you would absolutely understand. And that is sometimes foreign to people. And I know people, and me included, you know, there's things I think of back in the day. If I ever made $1 million, I'd never be broke. Well, then I end up homeless, you know? Or if you know, like,
I said that
how could you be a child star and then like be not like, yeah, dude, because you don't get it. Like you people don't have pity. Well, they had everything and it melted their minds because it's unnatural for people to be treated at such a like God level. You imagine being a child star, man.
Oh, and then
imagine being Corey Haim or one of those type of like,
and then abandoned.
Yeah, and then molested and all of the things, and it's like no wonder these kids didn't have a fighting chance
at all.
And when you look back, you're like, I would have traded seats with them and lives with them on any the drop of a hat. Now I look back, whoa, like wouldn't trade nothing for that.
Well, and it's not a surprise that somebody like as talented as River Phoenix died in front of the Viper Room, because you have to look at somebody who he was great at escaping his life into a character.
Exactly.
And then he died escaping his life. I mean, it's not all that shocking.
And just like many before him. I mean, I've watched a ton of, you know, true Hollywood mysteries with you know, AJ Benza. I've always liked the Where Are They Now. It's like were we talking on air about Detroit? And
we're not on air, but we were discussing it before. But there was
a lot of that. It should be a prerequisite for students to go see a city that was formerly like that great of a city, and then watch how it fell into disrepair and what happens, because then you will take everything a little bit more, you know, not so much with a grain of sand, because it can happen to our country right now, which is a whole other crazy thing. But.
Well, and even talking about where stuff can lead, you were talking about visiting Marvin Gaye's house. And you're talking about his father who shot him.
I remember.
And one of my prized possessions is What's Going On, and it's signed by Marvin Gaye, and it's on my wall, and I've never played the record because it's just it means a lot to me. And when you have something like that, somebody who was so amazing, it shows you where drugs and everything else can take you, to the point where his dad just basically had that very old school look of like, all right, I just have to take you out.
And listen, I guess the what we're getting at is that, you know, as you get older, you have empathy for things that you go like, whatever, loser, you had it all when you were 17, you squandered it. Like, yeah, dude, like it's a crazy business, man. It's a crazy life without that business, but that business is like, it's like looking through something that's already distorted through another distortion, through another distortion, through another, and you think you're seeing, and you got to know it's not. Like, and for the very few, it's still real. Like,
and to assume a child surrounded by yes men has the wherewithal to get through life after that,
family eating off your like living off your checks, and I mean, it just can't be right. Like, it can't be. It can't. It's so unhealthy. It's ridiculous. But I'll leave it at that. It's not what I can. I didn't come to talk about anything. But
I do want to talk about that a bit, because you know, you and I.
It's scaring me. That's why I'm gonna stop. Make it stop, because I'm glad.
No, you and I are both, you know, in recovery, and I wanted to talk to you about that, if that's all right.
I'd love to.
You became.
I'm an open book, bro.
I appreciate that a lot. And your first drug of choice was alcohol, and as you've
yes, I'd be cheeky, but I'd be honest with you, was escapism, like fantasy, like that's what I said. Like, in my mind, I always tell people, man, and they think I'm being cheeky, but Pippi Longstockings was my hero growing up. They used to play that Pippi Longstockings, those 4 different TV shows. Are you familiar with who she is? And what I liked about her, she had that can-do spirit. She had a box of gold upstairs, but she didn't even care about it, because she just dressed ragtag, and she made the best of everything. And she took care of Tommy and Annika. And when they wanted to do something, she would go upstairs and get a hot air balloon and tie it to her bed. And her and Tommy and Annika would fuck right off to Pirate Island, and she'd fight pirates. And I was just like, that's all I want. I want a couple of good friends and somewhere I could just go where we could just do whatever we like to do, pirate things with my pirate friends, and just sub-navigate this whole bullshit called life, because it just was never like, I always felt a stranger in my own home. And so fantasy was the first one. And then when I got old enough to start to drink, way before I was legally allowed, I mean, I started drinking about 14 and a half, 15, pretty late compared to most kids.
Yeah, mine was 14, 13, right in there.
But I remember with not only sufficient force, but I remember like it was yesterday, the first drink that worked. So I had a few mishaps. I drank some amaretto that we stole from my mother, and I threw up for like a day and a half in the bushes.
Yeah.
I didn't even like the smell of almonds for years. But
is it the look of the bottle? Why is it that one?
Because those are the ones nobody cares about. They're liqueurs that everybody drinks at a holiday, and nobody will notice if they're gone. If I pulled a couple beers out of the fridge, my mother would know immediately.
That's a good point. Yeah, because you always go for the one.
Yeah, the peppermint schnapps, and I was drinking like corn syrup with grain alcohol. But I threw up violently and just probably shit the couch. But whatever. It wasn't until I had a screwdriver, a vodka and orange, that it went down and it did something for me that I couldn't do for myself. And I know now with doing the work and long time of recovery that the things that changed for me fundamentally that night at that nightclub was, one, it changed the way I felt you were looking at me. Mm-hmm. And that was something, because I always felt you were looking at me with like, you're a piece of shit, you ain't good enough, you're this, that, you're that. And then the other thing that changed that night fundamentally when that thing happened was the way I felt about myself. Because I was always like, fuck you. I was the guy who was like, look at me, what the fuck you looking at, Couldn't tell but in my head, I already knew you thought I was a piece of shit because I thought I was a piece of shit. Because if your own mother thinks you're a piece of shit, and nobody in your family is like, giving you that, I gotta be a piece of shit, and how dare you see it too? So fuck you. And it was just like that. So that drink, all of a sudden, man, it was like my clothes fit better. I felt better looking. I could dance. I could talk to girls. Yeah. Prior to that, I couldn't dance around girls, man. I knew how to dance, but I couldn't do it around a girl because I was terrified of rejection and being laughed at, and have a couple beers and I'm like, whoa, a couple drinks, screwdrivers. And so I remember that night, not only those two things changed, I remember thinking to myself, why did I wait so long for this? Why did this take so long for it to work? And then my second thought was like, I never want to not feel this way again. And I drank every time I was outside of that house, and which was probably 5-6 times a week, because my mother was like,
it's that
don't wake me when you come up, when you come in. So we would sneak in the window at night. But I would go out. I lived a couple blocks away from a nightclub that was a teen nightclub called Phases. And everybody who grew up in the San Fernando Valley remembers Hot Tracks and Phases. And we lived there. It was like going to the mall at night. It was all kinds of cute girls and all kinds of cool dudes and drinking and drugging. I did not get into drugs back then. I was terrified of them. I only drank, but I cut my teeth at that place, man. I got into music in other stuff that I wasn't, predisposed to love, like, all of the new wave stuff, Susie and the Banshees and all of the club music. I was predisposed to like it, but I just wasn't as cool as if you're not in the club to listen to. But I started talking to girls, started having sex, started fighting if there wasn't no girls. It was like, your rite of passage of doing that stuff. And but I never went out without having a drink in my hand. And we went to whether stealing the beer, pimping it, which was, standing out in front of the liquor store asking older dudes, hey, brother, we didn't bring our ID. Could you get us,
Hey, a homeless guy. Or
whatever, bro.
Find the right store where you can use your ID, and then the guy will charge you $50 for a case. Yeah. But
we always found a way.
That warmth, though, right? That warmth that starts here and will just fill you with confidence and just
but it fills that hole. It fills that void. What I know now is that God-shaped hole for me. But at that time, it was just like, bro, and I'll say this, it's hysterical, man, and I've said it a million times if you've heard me share at 12-step meetings. But one time, and it was later in my sobriety, that I heard a transvestite, and this was back when you didn't see, that wasn't even a word on most people's, but there was a transvestite, and she was sharing one day, and she said, the first time I had ever drank, it made me feel wittier, prettier, and tittier. And I was like, fuck yeah. And I was like, oh. And it was a metaphor, but I got it. I'm like, dude, that's a dude who's now identifying as a woman. And when she drank, she felt wittier, prettier, and tittier. And I was like, fuck yeah, that's exactly how I felt. I'm just a man, and I just use the other. And I was like, perfect way to sum that up. Because even though, it made, and when I drank, it just, the possibilities were endless. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't optimistic in my normal state. It was like, I always thought, it's not going to work. How can this work? And when I had a few beers, I was like, how could it not work? You can do this. You can. And that's a great equalizer when you have self-doubt and negative self-talk, and it's been reaffirmed and confirmed by anybody you hold on high.
Especially when you're an insecure perfectionist.
100%, dude. 100%. 100%. I never even heard that before. I'm also an introverted extrovert, you know, but those are all real things.
Very much so.
You know, and as you know, in recovery, it's like, you know, egomaniacs with low self-esteem. Like, I don't like to think I'm an egomaniac, but then again, treat me halfway, you know, you'll find out. And then I'm like, I ain't shit anyway, so it doesn't matter, you know. But to find the center and to find the balance is where I like to, you know, live. In that area, you know, I never want to be the coolest dude in the room. I have never been the coolest dude in the room, but if you are, you're in the wrong room,
right?
Underachieving, you know.
Oh, I
never want to be the worst dude,
right?
Yeah, you're the coolest dude in the room.
No, I'm just kidding. We all know I'm not.
Hey, listen, you can have it tonight.
It's your,
not a rapper. Today, at least.
Hell no, I'm not today. But what was your if you don't mind me asking, like, what's that moment where you hit bottom and you finally said?
Which time?
Because we're kind of running. I don't want to run out because this is way too good of a conversation. I don't want to run out of time. Because, I guess there is always the first try, which I've experienced myself, which involved institutions, lockup, all that.
Yeah, I did all that.
Yeah. And then what's the moment where you just... it's such a cliche to say sick and tired of being sick and tired, but that's the feeling.
It is 100%, and that's why those cliches work. So I'll give you the elevator pitch because I would like to talk about The Outsider's House because it's life-changing stuff.
Yes.
So by the time I'm 30, I'm bankrupt. The House of Pain is over. My house got repossessed. My cars got repossessed. My mind was bent. I was depressed. I was couch surfing and faux homeless. I end up running into a friend who's sober, and he's about my age, and I always thought he was weird because he was a good-looking dude and a cool dude, but I was like, he's always at coffee houses hanging out with these weird people, and they happened to be, you know, 12-step people. And he said, why don't you come to a meeting with me? And that time I was ready. I had already been in rehab before and was just doing it to get people off my ass, but this time I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I don't remember who spoke. I don't remember what they said, but I remember hearing laughter. Yeah. And it had been a long time since I heard laughter. Now, I want to also back that up. I went from drinking in the mid-90s, I started to do ecstasy, and then by the end of House of Pain, when it was at the end, I had already started doing methamphetamines, which was the drug of choice in Hollywood at the time. I dabbled in coke, but didn't love it. Yeah. Meth I did like. And
ecstasy I always had, at that time, a little bit jammed into it, too.
And yes, and you couldn't even do it habitually, though, if you wanted to. It was like one of those things you could do, and then you had to wait 3 days, and I didn't have 3 days to wait.
Your brain would just drop to that depression. Serotonin. It was really bad.
Yeah. So all that to say, I was getting really bad out there for me, and I was really running into a lot of problems, and in all areas. So I ended up getting sober, go to the second meeting, don't remember what they said, I just remember how I felt. Everybody was like, welcome, 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 are you new? Welcome. Gave me a welcome chip. It didn't feel funny to identify. I felt like I was home. I started to put one foot in front of the other. I started working on my steps, got that guy to sponsor me, started taking commitments, did everything they did in 1 year, got my 1 year K, couldn't believe it, started becoming employable again, got a solo record deal, worked all year 2 on this record. Year 3 comes around and I started to be too cool for school, had some outside stuff again. Maybe I started the record ended up not coming out, label folds up, give me my record back. I feel like a little I spent all the money that they had gave me, which is about $250,000 in advances and $500,000 or $250,000 in publishing. It was about $500,000 all in. Mm-hmm. And now I'm like running on empty again, and I'm like, this is not what I signed up for. You know, I in my crazy head, I thought that like once I got clean, I'd get the cash and prizes, and that was just part of getting clean. And
you'd know how to manage it, right? And how did you do it again? It's your fault.
Exactly. So I decided in my head that I was probably a meth head, but clearly I'm Irish. I should be able to handle a drink by now. It is 3 years and some change sobriety, and I thought, it wasn't that bad. How bad was it? Right. And the book says, the book that I read says, if you don't think you're an alcoholic, go try it. Go try it. And so I tried it, and I was wildly successful drinking for about 72 hours, and I was right back on methamphetamines, and it was another almost 3 years downward spiral. Ended up in a warehouse with no teeth in my mouth, faux homeless. Basically, it was a friend who let me stay in his old warehouse, but there was no bed, there was no. And by the skin of my teeth, somebody offered to take me to a meeting, and I had been to many before and just wasn't going to, it felt like I was never going to get it again. It was a gift the first time. And this time, one night, something changed. I don't know why, but I had to get right with the idea that if all I got out of sobriety was sobriety, that it had to be enough, and it was. And this time, I didn't want my old life back. That was the secret I had originally. I just wanted a chance at a new life. And in April, on the 15th, that'll be 19 years. So it's been
congratulations.
Really good run. I will tell you this. Life on life's terms is difficult no matter what. It's high highs and low lows. And like I said, I shoot for even keel now. I know that sounds a little boring, but it's like where I live.
The truth.
And right when I got sober this time, close to 20 years ago, 19 years ago, I started La Coca Nostra, which is a side project, which inevitably brought back House of Pain as a one band with the other dudes with us. And we had a nice little run at that, but then that fell apart for different reasons. And I worked on a clothing company, and we turned it into $1 million company. And then me and the dude had a falling out, and they did me dirty on one end, and they think I did. Everybody's, So I had a lot of like really cool things, and then come crashing down in sobriety. I was married for 10 years, and ended up going through a divorce, which I never thought in a million years that was going to happen.
That was kind of why you were buying the house, right?
Yeah, it was why when I bought the Outsiders house. But to get to the Outsiders house, which I'm trying to do, is that we went on tour in 2009 with La Coca Nostra, and we played Kane's Ballroom, which is this fantastic. It's like the CBGBs of the Midwest.
I'm very lucky to have played it.
Oh,
I'm very lucky to have played it. Yeah, it was one of the coolest experiences.
Same, yeah. And so for me, it was always on that list. But we had went over it when in '92. That was too small of a venue for us. But now it was a perfect size. We played it, and that's when I had the epiphany while I was in Tulsa. I was like, man, I felt like I've been here before, but I never was. I go, oh my God, the Outsiders. And that was the first day of the rest of my life. I went looking for locations. I found the drive-in from the movie The Outsiders. I found the park from the movie, and by finding the park, I found the house. And I was obsessed.
And the park is still there where he gets stabbed?
Still there, yeah. You're going to come visit.
I'm seriously coming down. Yes, please. And I can't thank you enough for inviting me.
No, listen, and you're 4 hours away. It's not that big of a drive.
I have no problem driving that at all, dude.
Me neither. I'm a driving guy.
Yeah, me too.
So I took photos out front of it, and then I took a photo of a hole that's punched in the wall at Kane's Ballroom. They now have it in the office, and allegedly Sid Vicious punched a hole in the wall on his way out of the green room when the Sex Pistols played in '78. And I was at the time very good friends with Steve Jones, the guitar player. So I posted on Facebook, which was this new thing. We were still kind of MySpace guys. The hole that Sid Vicious punched in the wall, and me in front of the Outsiders house. And people went batshit for this thing. Back in the days, you'd be lucky if you get 3-4 likes, because people were so like, what does that mean if I like it? Does he think, Right. But they went crazy for this. You like that one? Because you remember, people were like gun shy. Like, does that mean I like her if I put a like on there, or does he think I'm like talking him?
What am I? Yeah.
Just people were so it got crazy likes, and I was like, oh my God, I'm onto something here. So I started going on all of those things, which I told you, the Delta Bravo Urban Exploration Team. Try to say that 3 times fast. But if you Google that, you'll see the squad that came out of that. That's really what I built. And what I realized was we're at the age now where we have a phone in our hand that has the access to the largest library ever known to humankind, which is Google. We have navigation. We have better than Magellan could ever do for you. You have basically a VHS, you have a camera, a video camera, a station, whatever your Twitter and MySpace and Facebook and Instagram or whatever you're on. We live in an era which is very unique. And so what I started to do on that tour, because I was sober and everybody else was high, every time we would go to, I would look for pop culture, historic locations, whether that was the Son of Sam in Manhattan and looking where all the crimes happened in Queens, or where Mickey Mantle's buried when we got to Dallas, or where we got to the Grassy Knoll, or any of those.
Is Tulsa too where Sam Kinnison's buried?
Yeah, well, I went there. It's where he's from too.
Yeah, I went to because I do the same thing, and I went to see his grave when I was.
We all kind of do, and that's the beautiful thing. So we're at that generation where we're looking back now at this history, and it's remarkable history, and it's incredible because we grew up raised by raised by the television and raised by these iconic things, and now we have the ability to go back and see. And so that's our page. We kind of abandoned that. There is a secret page or a member page, and you won't have to look for it or nothing. But if you're interested, Delta Bravo Urban Exploration private page, and we'll accept it. It's people from all over the world that love pop culture and that does the before and after. But that's when I realized I'm onto something here, and there is something to be said about this Outsiders house, because that's the first one I had ever found. And did the before and after MASH. And I started to think about this house. Why isn't somebody turning this into a museum? And why isn't this saved like the Christmas Story house is? And that was a thing at the time. And the Dreams was a thing. So those were 2 things already.
Right.
But I was like, this is incredible. And at the time, the house was for sale for $42,000, bro. I'm coming from Beverly Hills at the time. I'm not trying to say that to sound pious or. But I lived in a little apartment off of Rexford and Olympic. But you couldn't park a third car in that neighborhood for $42,000. 42 grand annually.
Yeah.
So I could not believe, one, the house was still on earth, two, that it could be had for 42 grand, and three, that it's sitting on the market and nobody wanted it. So fast forward 5 years, started to do the Delta Bravo thing religiously as like my full-time passion project. And I would go somehow, I would make a beeline for that house every time I was crossing the U.S., whether it was going to Detroit to Urban Explorer, going to Pete Rose's childhood home, or Larry Bird's grandmother's house where he learned to play basketball. I was hitting all over the U.S. looking for historic locations. And I would always come back to the Outsider's house. And at year 5, I realized that the Habitat for Humanities was coming through that neighborhood wholesale, tearing everything out. And I thought every year I'd watch them come one block closer. So it's basically a block a year. And I'm like, next year I'm going to come and it's going to be gone. So I started to panic. I'd watched a few things that I loved prior get torn down. And I thought, somebody doesn't save this thing, it's going to be done. And I started to dig around, and with a little bit of help, we found the owner. We told her, we know it's off market, but if you ever think of selling it, she said, your timing is impeccable. She said, I wanted 42 for it, but I won't take a penny less than 20. My friend countered and said, ma'am, I've seen the house. It's a shit show. I won't give you more than 15 grand. She accepted. The tenants were 8 months behind in rent, and she said, you're going to have to deal with that. They owe me money, but they're not. So it was a lot to deal with. I get to the house. I basically thought I robbed her for 15 grand. When I got to the house, I got 15 grand worth of shit. Trust me, it was a teardown.
Oh, yeah.
But it was the most beautiful thing that had ever happened. I panicked, and in panicking, I asked for help. And this is where I always, when I talk to kids, my whole life, I've been covering up that I don't know a lot. Mm-hmm. And to tell you that I don't know a lot is easier for me than to ask for help. I don't know, man. I got a ninth grade education. I don't know, And because somewhere along the line, I felt it was instilled in me that that's a weak position, ask for help. But what I know as an adult is it's the strong position. It's humbling yourself and asking anybody, because anybody that is real with their shit is going to be like, how can I help? I'd love to show you how I do this, that, or the third. But growing up, it almost killed me many times because I needed the help, and I literally couldn't get the words out. I need help. And I need instruction, or I need you to show me how. And for the first time in my life, I just humbled myself because of sobriety and what I had learned. And I said, guys, I bought this house. I have no money to move forward. I have no plan other than to save it and turn it into a museum. And I have no way of I don't know anything about redoing anything. Would you help? And the help was overwhelming. And the most came from the just everyday Tulsans. And I started to go back and forth and realize that why am I going back to LA? Well, the love is here. Yeah. I fell in love with the town. I fell in love with the people. I met the author. The author gave me a nice little check. But it was really people the neighbor was like, hey man, your grass is up to here. Let me cut your grass for you. And what happened was when we started taking care of the Outsider's house, the neighbor started to feel some type of way, and they started to take care of their house, and it had a nice ripple effect. And then the city came back and redid that whole side of town that had been long on the list of take care of that side, but they didn't. And finally, when we put enough eyes on it,
well, and that was the working class neighborhood across from
less than that. Yeah, it was the old auto salvage yards and real working class.
Because it was because it was the greasers versus Sochas.
100%.
And then, okay.
And it is it's the house that they filmed in. The park is right on the corner. Coppola pulled up in 82 and he used a school that had been shuttered as his base camp in his studio, similar like this. It's like a big building that they could just run. And they did The Outsiders, and mid-Outsiders, he discovered that he wanted to do another book of hers called Rumblefish.
Rumblefish, yeah.
They did those movies back to back, 2 weeks down after.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh. And both are filmed there, and both are classics.
What I always loved about that was kind of like the way he demanded to shoot in Sicily for The Godfather is the way that he did it with Tulsa, where it just had to have that feel.
And I'm sure it was to the chagrin of every executive at Warner Brothers, because they were like, are you fucking kidding me? You want to go all the way? You want to take everybody from Hollywood and bring them to Tulsa, Oklahoma in 82, and there's no internet and there's no cell phones?
Nope.
Really? But he did it, and to his credit, that's why they play so well. Not only for everybody, but for Okies, because it is like the pride of that whole community. And what I found, so I made a museum. It took 3.5 years to do it.
Okay.
I had one poster and one book, and now I have the largest collection of Outsiders movie and book collection known to man and woman. And what I thought I was building was a greaser museum for middle-aged dudes like me and you, or I'll speak for me, and what I ended up building by default was a 7th grade educational museum, because we do Monday through Thursdays. We're closed to the public. We do school tours. We did over 4,000 last year. We're scheduled to about 8,000 this year, and it's almost done. And
Incredible.
we've done. It's basically word of mouth. And on the weekends, we do anywhere from 100 to 150 people a day. No advertising except for the social media posts that we post. It's just been an incredible thing. And then I get asked to speak at all kinds of civic events and to speak to all kinds of school students. And what I tell them is my story. I tell them about the good, the bad, and the ugly. How I grew up, what happened, the bad choices I made. Music saves me, but it also then destroys, because it arrested the consequences and the comes with the life that I was living prior to music. And when music was over, I went right back to the thing I knew best, was crime. And then I became a drug addict, and now I'm sober. And now, this house has been a mitzvah to me, but it's also something I put forward. It's a pay it forward thing. Yeah. And I get to speak to kids, and maybe I don't reach them all, but I reach a few, and the ones that they needed to hear what I said, because what I tell them is the stuff that nobody told me. One, ask for help if you need help. It's weak if you don't. It's strong when you do, and anybody who will. And I also tell them, listen, you're going to see your shot sometimes in life, and you're not going to have the money to do it. You might not have the education to do it or the skills, and you might not even have a well thought out or laid out plan. And all three of those are really ideal when doing these kind of projects. But there are going to be times where you don't have any of those, but you have passion and you see your shot. Take your shot. And I wish somebody would have told me that sooner. And I don't know if I would have believed it, but I took my shot, so it's proof positive, and I'm proof of concept. This is doable. So all of that to say, we've been open about 3.5 years. It's been a wonderful experience. I bought a house across the street, turned into a greaser Airbnb. It's pretty much like the museum light. And the goal now is to build an S.E. Hinton Museum, which will be a campus-like situation where kids can come and learn about screenwriting and writing and acting and music and all of it, and mix all of her stuff. Tex, The Outsiders, Rumblefish. That was then. This is now, and 11 other novels that she wrote, and really champion the young Susie, who was 15 and a half, failed English and got a D+ in creative writing, yet she persisted despite those things, and she's an American legend and icon. Yeah. Oh, and
wrote about her life and created her own art.
That's right. And last week we had Angelina Jolie and the cast of The Outsiders, the musical, which is going to be on Broadway in April. And this was just this weekend. I mean, I just come out of that right now. So this saga continues.
And I love the Rob Lowe and signing the towel and the picture with him and his son and visiting it and where it all started.
We've had most of the cast come through. It's easier for me to tell you who hasn't been there than who has, but Matt Dillon's been there. Ralph's been there many times. C. Thomas Howell is like my ace in the hole. He comes through. He's coming back to do Movie on the Lawn and Q&As at the house in a month or so. We're hoping to get Amelia one day, Tom, and Diane Lane,
That'd be amazing.
We've got, but to be continued, man.
Yes. Well, we're about to run out, but I would like to come visit it if that's
I'm going to insist on it.
Yeah, and I don't know if we're even allowed to bring cameras, but
we bring everything. Yeah,
okay,
of course.
We're going to do this.
Yeah,
we can do a podcast on the couch at the Outsider's house. We could do a remote.
We're going to continue this then there, if that's cool. Because it would be a dream of mine, just because I love the movie, and I really, really enjoy talking to you, and I can't thank you enough for coming on today.
My man.
How can we get to the outside? Can you tell us anywhere where we can check it out?
Yeah, just theoutsidershouse.com or any of the social medias. We're on there, and it's a cool little community, man. The fandom is real.
And is there anything else you'd like to promote while we have you?
No, just stay gold.
There you go. All right. Well, you stay gold, Danny boy. I appreciate you coming on, my friend. All right. Well, thank you guys very much. You can check, obviously, my tour dates out at davelandau.com. I got a lot coming up. But please check out The Outsider's House. It really is amazing what he's been able to do. It's following a dream and a passion. And if you're ever out there just struggling with sobriety or anything else, there are people like we've just talked to, and
absolutely
I'll put a link in the description.
And we do listen. It's pretty much, it's not on the books, but we do a 12 and 12 reading. We do a book study at the Outsider's House gift shop. It's really open to anybody. We just have limited space, but 7 if you live locally and you want to come by at 7 p.m. on Monday nights, or even better, we do a speaker participation meeting at the Circle Cinema in Tulsa, Oklahoma, every Sunday at 10:30 a.m. Be there or be.
Amen. Thank you, sir. Thank you guys very much for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night.